You really should step aside now, Mom. Investors expect fresh leadership, my daughter Chloe announced, raising her newly etched crystal flute toward the chandeliers of the Meridian Hotel ballroom. Gasps rippled beneath the string quartet's elegant trill. I felt every eye pivot from the shimmering Foster Tech banner to the aging founder, in a dove-gray suit, me. The ink on our IPO paperwork was barely dry. 12 hours earlier, I'd pressed the ceremonial button at the New York Stock Exchange, heart pounding with the joy of seeing the startup Chloe and I built in my garage flash across the trading screens. I thought tonight's gala would be a celebration of our shared triumph. Instead, Chloe's words tasted like copper in my mouth. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments what dream you fought for, because sometimes the greatest battles begin after victory. Chloe's fiancé, Spencer, clinked his glass beside her. New blood drives value, he added smoothly, the same tone he'd used pitching our data security platform to Silicon Valley sharks. The ballroom erupted in polite laughter, expensive, brittle, complicit. I smiled, the expression cracking like old porcelain. In my clutch, I held a small velvet box, a vintage fountain pen I'd restored for Chloe, 22-karat gold nib, engraved with the date we first coded our prototype. A founder's pen for the daughter who'd become my CTO at 25. Tonight was supposed to be symbolic, a passing of wisdom, not abdication. Behind us, an LED wall cycled through glowing graphs of our opening day stock surge. I heard our chief counsel whisper the word succession to a board member, saw heads nod in slow, predatory synchronicity. Succession? I owned 61% of founder shares. Unvested, still under my control. Chloe knew that. Spencer certainly did. Wine-dark embarrassment flooded my cheeks. I imagined scrawling the signing bonus for our first intern with that pen, Chloe's giggles echoing through my drafty workshop, the smell of solder and burnt coffee hanging in the air. She had once begged to stay up past midnight to finish the login module. "We're building the future, Mom," the 14-year-old Chloe had declared, eyes blazing brighter than my desk lamp. Now her eyes glittered with diamond dust and calculation. Fresh leadership. Fresh enough to erase the fingerprints of the woman who raised her?
Speech.
Speech. Spencer called, pounding the mic stand. A spotlight spilled over me like interrogation glare. My mouth dried. Around the room, murmured fragments floated. Takeover clause, voting power, vesting schedule. I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for believing in Foster Tech," I began, voice steadier than my pulse. 15 years ago, Chloe and I. Actually, she interjected, stepping forward, I've prepared something special. A sleek tablet materialized in her manicured hands. My own script suddenly felt amateur, handwritten on notepaper folded in my pocket. The lights dimmed. The LED wall shifted to a minimalist slide titled Phase 2, Vision 2030. Chloe's vision. Someone killed the stage monitor feeding me notes. I was plunged into the role of reluctant spectator as my daughter unveiled international expansion, aggressive hiring, a rebrand of our humble Infinity Loop logo, all without a single nod to the woman who had mortgaged her house to buy their first server rack. I retreated to the fringe of the dais, heart hammering like a misfiring piston. Spencer sidled up, voice silky. "Look, Linda, you deserve a rest. Nantucket, Aspen, wherever. Cash out, enjoy life."
Cash out.
Everything I'd done, coding through chemo, negotiating seed rounds between radiation sessions, testing prototypes while my hair fell in brittle clumps, had been for the dream Chloe and I shared. I scanned the crowd. My younger son, Evan, was live streaming from UCLA finals week. Couldn't make it. My ex-husband Mark hovered near the bar, more interested in the Scotch list than the slideshow. No allies. Except perhaps Dana, our original QA engineer, standing rigid near the stage curtains, her expression a mix of pity and outrage. As the applause thundered for Chloe's finale, Spencer whispered, "Board meets Monday to ratify the new leadership charter. Your signature would make it painless." Painless, like being anesthetized before amputation. In that moment, something inside me calcified. Not rage, something colder, crystalline. I slipped the pen box back into my purse, unnoticed amid the swirl of congratulations enveloping Chloe. Dawn next morning. Gray rain streaked my office window downtown, turning the skyline into a watercolor blur. I'd been there all night, poring over our bylaws. Founder shares, transferable only upon death or explicit dilution consent from holder. Legal steal. At 7:03 a.m., I logged into the corporate treasury portal. Two keystrokes froze every discretionary budget request above $5,000, including the seven-figure marketing blitz Chloe needed for her fresh rebrand. Authority, founder chairwoman, effective immediately. A soft rap on the door. Dana slipped inside, holding two coffees. Heard the rumor mill. You okay? I slid the pen box across the desk. Think she'll appreciate this now. Dana opened it. Whistle low. She won't until it's gone. I stood, shoulders straightening. Schedule an emergency board call. Noon. Agenda. I met her gaze, reminding the board who built the machinery they're about to strip for parts. Dana grinned, a flash of loyalty. I'll notify legal. My phone buzzed. Chloe's contact photo. All sparkly eyes and champagne from last night. I let it ring out, then typed a single text. Mom, we need to talk before noon. In person. Three dots appeared, vanished, reappeared. Chloe, busy prepping investor Q&A. Can it wait? My reply felt like striking flint. Mom, it cannot. Decisions are already in motion.
Send.
I closed the blinds, shutting out the bleary city. My reflection stared back, silver-streaked bun, fine lines bracketed by resolve, a penless mother ready for battle. If you think the story ended with a frozen account, stick around. Because the real war for foster tech and for my family was only just beginning. At 11:58 a.m., I entered the foster tech boardroom with a binder under one arm and a lifetime of resolve strapped to my spine. The table was polished to a mirror finish, but it reflected none of the warmth that once marked our startup days, just glints of tension and veiled ambition. 12 chairs surrounded the obsidian oval. Most were occupied already. Rick Tanner's, our board chair and private equity appointee, Angela Mystery, legal counsel, 3 VCs from our Series C round, all young, all disturbingly cheerful, and of course, Chloe, seated exactly where I used to sit, in the founder's seat. She didn't look up. A young assistant brought in an extra coffee and whispered, "They weren't expecting you, Miss Foster." Weren't they? I took my place at the head of the table. My place, ignoring the whisper ripple that followed. Chloe's eyes flicked to me, guarded. I thought this was a strategic planning session, she said coolly, closing her tablet. I opened my binder and tapped a printed clause with my red lacquered fingernail. It is. Specifically, a reminder of Clause 7C in our founding charter. The one that requires my explicit consent for any dilution or reassignment of voting authority related to founder shares. Rick cleared his throat. Linda, let's not make this adversarial. This is about vision alignment. Alignment with whose vision, Rick? The one that erased 15 years of my work from a single slide deck. Silence. Linda, Chloe began, tone carefully modulated. I'm not trying to erase you. But the market is shifting fast. We need bold direction, global presence. You mean we need an image scrubbed clean of me? I leaned forward, placing the pen box in the center of the table. Tell me, Chloe, do you even remember this? She blinked. That's the prototype pen you begged to use to sign our first patent application. The one you dropped in the sink and cried about for a week. Angela Mystery sat straighter. Let's stay on task. The board convened to discuss next phase leadership strategy, which requires a founding signature. I stood slowly and handed out printed copies of our legal charter, each section marked in neon yellow. So, unless you've changed the laws of Delaware Incorporation, I believe I still have a say. One of the VCs, young man with a blazer too tight for comfort, murmured, "We assumed you'd take the chair emerita route. Maybe spend more time mentoring, enjoying your legacy." My legacy, I said evenly, isn't a photo on the wall. It's control. And I'm exercising it. The room shifted. Eyes darted to Chloe, who now looked like a pilot who'd just discovered the autopilot button wasn't connected to the wings. Mom, she said softly, you're not thinking long term. Investors will panic if they sense discord. The stock could take a hit. That's your concern, I replied. Mine is trust. And from where I'm sitting, the biggest instability in this room is the daughter who held a public execution before the ink dried on her mother's IPO. Chloe flushed. Rick tried to mediate. We can reschedule. Linda, we'll draft a side letter to revisit this. I cut him off. There's nothing to revisit. I've temporarily frozen discretionary budget requests above $5,000, including Chloe's Global Expansion Fund. My authority as founder chair allows it, and legal can verify. Angela opened her laptop, lips tight. Within moments, the click stopped. She's right, she confirmed. Clause 10B grants this authority unless overruled by a unanimous board vote and founder consent, which, at present, we do not have. The room exhaled a quiet panic. Chloe stood. You'll crater the company over your ego? I rose to match her. Over my principles. Then you've made your point, she said bitterly, collecting her tablet. You win. I picked up the pen box. No, Chloe. This isn't about winning. It's about remembering who built the scaffolding you're now climbing. The board adjourned in a hushed shuffle. Outside the glass walls, employees buzzed in celebration of our IPO's second day. No one in the central office yet realized that under the surface, a seismic rift had formed. As I exited, Dana trailed behind. That was surgical, she said. I nodded, face stone. I didn't survive cancer, a bankruptcy, and raising 2 kids alone just to be sidelined by a rebrand and a smile. My phone buzzed. A private message from Spencer. Spencer, we need to talk. Chloe doesn't know I'm messaging you.
Please.
It's important. Interesting. I pocketed my phone. Because when the golden boy of Foster Tech starts whispering behind Chloe's back, you know the cracks are just beginning to show. That evening, I met Spencer in the marble-clad lounge of the Langdon Club, a place that screamed discreet crisis management. I recognized the decor: mahogany panels, soft jazz, low lighting designed to soothe the high net worth when their empires start to wobble. Spencer waved me over, already seated in a booth tucked into a shadowed alcove. He looked less polished than usual, tie loosened, a bead of sweat tracing his temple despite the air conditioning. Thanks for coming, he said, sliding me a bourbon without asking. I came for the curiosity, I replied. But bourbon never hurts. He smiled, a flash of the charming confidence that had initially won Chloe over, and me if I was honest. Spencer knew how to sell, how to soften edges. But tonight, there was no pitch. She's out of control, he said without preamble.
Chloe.
Ever since the IPO, she's been different. She announced my professional obsolescence to a ballroom of investors, I said drily. I noticed. Spencer leaned forward. There's more. She's already working to move your founder's shares into a trust controlled by the board. She thinks she can leverage a clause through corporate restructuring and get a court to declare you an executive emeritus, no voting rights. I sipped my drink slowly, masking the jolt of anger that pulsed through my veins. That would require proving I'm no longer mentally competent to lead. Spencer nodded, lowering his voice. She's already talked to a firm in Palo Alto that specializes in elder transitions. She's positioning it as a preemptive measure, for your own good. But make no mistake, she wants full control. I'm not even 70, I said flatly. He shrugged. That's not the point. She thinks you're stuck in the past. That the original vision was noble, but now she's the brand. You're overhead. That stung. Not because I believed it, but because I'd seen the signs. The marketing deck had replaced my photo with a stylized icon. Her speaking engagements were billed as the visionary behind Foster Tech. I was being gently ghosted from my own story. So, why are you telling me this? I asked. Guilt. He hesitated. Insurance. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not just marrying Chloe, he said. I'm merging futures with a corporation now worth $1.7 billion on paper. If she tanks the brand by alienating you, or worse, gets dragged into legal hell over founder rights. It hurts us both.
Us.
He glanced down at the table. Her and me. I don't agree with everything she's doing. And frankly, I don't think she's ready to run this company alone. She's brilliant, but she's reckless. I finished for him. He nodded. I leaned back, assessing him. You don't strike me as the whistleblower type, Spencer. What do you want in return?
He met my eyes.
I want protection. If the ship sinks, I need a lifeboat. My name's on too many filings. I've got a significant prenup drafted, but if this turns into a founder versus board war, you'll want safe passage. Exactly. I pulled a business card from my clutch. Call Marcus Cooper. He's my estate attorney. Tell him I sent you. He'll help you draft a statement. Neutral tone. Nothing aggressive, but enough to document what you've shared. Spencer pocketed the card like it was a key to the last lifeboat on the Titanic. Thank you. Before I could rise, he added, there's one more thing. She's planning a board vote in 6 weeks. A special resolution, new leadership charter, full executive transition. It's not official yet, but it's already drafted. Who's backing her? Angela, of course. Rick is soft. The VCs are skittish, but if she sweetens their compensation, they'll roll over. I stared at the amber liquid in my glass, swirling it slowly. She's moving faster than I thought. She's scared, he said. You called her bluff. She's scrambling to consolidate power before your next move. I stood, leaving half the drink untouched. Then we won't give her time. Next morning, my calendar was cleared by 8 a.m., and by 9 o'clock, Marcus Cooper was in my living room, tie loosened, sleeves rolled.
He didn't ask for small talk.
She's going for incapacitation, he said, skimming through documents I printed from Spencer's email. They'll present a gradual concern, stress, burnout, potential decline, and pair it with board concerns. It's dirty, but not unprecedented. They're building a legal case for my ouster, I said. He nodded. But here's what they haven't calculated. You're holding majority founder shares. As long as your competency is intact and documented, you control the board's ability to enforce structural changes. Then document me, I said. Start with a cognitive assessment, medical review, letters from professional colleagues. I already booked the neuropsych team at St. Augustine, he said. Full cognitive panel. We'll have the report in 2 days. Ironclad. Good, I said, heart racing, because I have another move planned, something definitive. That afternoon, I called Dana into my office. I need a full audit of platform code deployment since the IPO, I said. Every change, every approval, every untracked edit. Her brows lifted. You think they're cooking something? I think Chloe's been quietly shifting infrastructure into a proprietary module tied to her fiancé's consulting firm. Dana's eyes widened. You suspect diversion? I suspect betrayal. She nodded, tight-lipped. I'll start pulling logs today. As she left, I glanced at the framed patent on the wall, Foster Tech's original codebase. The algorithm Chloe and I wrote during winter nights when our furnace barely worked. I remembered her telling me, "We'll never sell out, Mom. We're building this for people, not profit." Now the same girl was trying to write me out of history and use my name to do it. Let them come for me. Because they had no idea what a fully awake founder could do. By Tuesday morning, the fog over the harbor had thickened, a fitting metaphor for the state of Foster Tech's internal systems. I sat in my office, a mug of oversteeped tea growing cold beside me as I watched Dana scan a labyrinth of code lines projected onto the wall. She was the only person I trusted to do this, because she was the only one who remembered the old framework, the one Chloe and I built together. There, Dana muttered, stabbing at the display with a capped marker. Right there. Line 4807. I narrowed my eyes. The code looked ordinary at first. Modular logging routine for third-party API authentication. Standard in any SaaS platform. But Dana expanded the block, pulled up a secondary log, and cross-referenced it with a compiled access stream. This chunk is pointing somewhere else, she said. Not Foster Tech's internal sandbox. It's pinging an endpoint hosted on a separate server cluster.
She brought up the IP.
Company, Arkwell Solutions LLC. She read aloud. I blinked. Spencer's firm. Dana nodded. It's worse than you think. They've copied part of our customer behavior model. Not just analytics, whole slices of our adaptive learning engine. The room spun slightly. The platform Chloe and I built was sacred. Every algorithm we crafted was designed with user protection at its core, adaptive security, without invasive overreach. This was different. It was bleeding that architecture out into a third-party shell. Where does the data go? I asked. Dana hesitated. If I'm reading this right, it's scraping our anonymized metadata and duplicating it into Arkwell's cloud. Not illegal, per se, but ethically? Disastrous, I finished. It violates everything our privacy policy stands for. Chloe had to authorize this. Dana nodded grimly. But here's the catch. She did it through a privileged proxy key. One only the CTO and CEO have access to. Meaning, she did it using my credentials. Dana pulled up the access log. Time-stamped 3 weeks ago. Used your founder admin key, which you haven't touched since the IPO. No, I said, heart sinking, because I gave her temporary override rights. For a maintenance patch. She said it was for a bug in the Android rollout. She cloned your key. Silence pressed down on the room. I realized then it wasn't just about pushing me out. Chloe was laundering company data into her fiancé's startup while laying the groundwork to declare me mentally unfit. If she succeeded, the founder clause that protected my shares could be dissolved by emergency vote. She'd have control. Arkwell would get acquired. She wasn't just cutting me out.
She was using me.
2 hours later, at Marcus Cooper's office. The moment I explained the situation, Marcus's jaw tightened. That crosses from internal politics to criminal exposure. She used my admin access to offload proprietary code into a firm she's financially entangled with. He nodded. That's breach of fiduciary duty at minimum. Potentially corporate fraud. And if Arkwell goes public or gets acquired, they profit from stolen tech. I tapped the table slowly. Can we stop her? Marcus leaned forward.
Yes.
But only if we move fast and play two fronts, legal containment and narrative control. What do you need? Documentation, Dana's audit, timestamps, logs. I'll file a cease and desist against Arkwell and prepare an injunction to freeze Chloe's access to system-wide deployment until a forensic review can occur. And the board? That's trickier. She's been conditioning them for months. If we go public too early, she'll spin it as founder paranoia or generational burnout. Then we don't go public, I said, fingers tightening. Not yet. Marcus gave me a curious look. You have another plan? I nodded slowly. Spencer came to me first. He wants to cut a deal. He's already nervous. What if he's willing to wear a wire, or at least produce emails that show he knew this was happening? That would help. A lot. I stared out the window, the skyline glittering like a wall of polished knives. Tell him if he cooperates, I'll keep his name off any formal complaints. Marcus blinked. You're letting him walk? No, I said coldly. I'm letting him fall, just not from my hand. That night, at my brownstone, I opened the old metal box I kept hidden in the back of my office closet. Inside were two things. A flash drive labeled lockbox, Q1 architecture, final. A manila folder titled Project Remus. It was the original version of our system. The clean code. Before Spencer came on. Before Chloe started pitching optimization modules to investors. Back when Foster Tech was built for people, not quarterly returns. I plugged in the flash drive. The UI booted like a memory coming alive. Sparse. Functional. Beautiful. And tucked inside the source files was a hidden clause. A failsafe. Years ago, I had written it after we signed our first term sheet. A safeguard protocol embedded at system level. A way to trigger internal alerts to every major partner and board member in the event of irregular third-party siphoning activity. I had created a ghost in the code. A whistleblower mechanism no one else knew existed. I clicked Prepare Package. A dialog box appeared. Project Remus. Activation timestamp?
Now.
Heavy checkmark, 72 hours. I chose 72. Let her plan. Let her posture. Let her think she had won. Because in 3 days, Chloe was hosting a media panel on Foster Tech's next decade. The tech press would be there, investors, executives, and so would the truth. The day of the media panel arrived draped in glossy pretense. Floor-to-ceiling banners of Foster Tech's new brand identity were being hoisted outside the Pearl Event Center in downtown Boston. Stark whites, razor-thin fonts, bold slogans about data dignity and human-centered algorithms. Irony, I thought, sipping my black coffee from a travel mug in the back seat of my hired car. Dignity had become Chloe's favorite word, right up until she started secretly bleeding our data into Arkwell's private cloud. I arrived at the venue precisely an hour before the event. The air was thick with controlled chaos. Interns fumbling with mic packs, journalists rehearsing talking points, PR managers fluttering like butterflies on espresso highs. Chloe stood at the center of it all in a fitted navy jumpsuit, phone in one hand, latte in the other, rehearsing her sound bites for the TechView cameras. She didn't notice me at first. When she finally did, her expression faltered. Only for a second. Then she strode over, flashing her stage smile.
Mom.
I didn't think you were coming. I smiled back, cool and steady. Wouldn't miss it. You're not speaking, right? Just observing. Chloe glanced sideways. This is a high-stakes platform. I need it to go smoothly. It will, I said softly, though not in the way you expect. She narrowed her eyes at that, but before she could respond, Spencer appeared behind her. He looked pale, ashen really, and not from the bright panel lights. His jaw twitched slightly as he approached me. Miss Foster, he said quietly. Can we talk? Chloe whipped around, surprised. You two have been speaking? We've had some alignment conversations, I said smoothly. Her gaze pinged between us, then softened into something that almost resembled sympathy. Listen, Mom. I know things have been tense, but after this launch, we'll all be on the same side again. I promise. I didn't respond, because promises, I'd learned, are easier to make than they are to keep. 11 a.m., the panel begins. The room was packed. Rows of venture capitalists, industry analysts, journalists, and junior developers filled the velvet seats. A sleek LED backdrop pulsed behind the panelists. Chloe took center stage. To her left, Spencer. To her right, Rick Tanners and Angela Mystery. The lights dimmed. Welcome, Chloe began, her voice amplified with that practiced pitch of confidence, to Foster Tech's Vision 2035. Applause. We're not just building products, she continued. We're building trust. We're building privacy. We're building the future of ethical data. I nearly choked on the irony. Behind her, the screen flashed a glossy sizzle reel of smiling users, AI security modules, and flowy text overlays. Predictive, private, personal. As the moderator asked questions about leadership transition and expansion, I noticed Spencer fidgeting. His collar was damp. He kept tugging his cuffs. He looked like a man on the verge of collapse. Then the moderator asked, how does Foster Tech plan to maintain transparency during this growth phase? That's when Spencer spoke. Well, he said, voice strained but clear. Transparency starts from within. Chloe stiffened. Her eyes locked onto him like lasers. Spencer continued. There have been some internal questions raised recently about our platform's proprietary modules, about where our user data actually flows. Dead silence. Chloe cut in smoothly. I think what Spencer's referring to is our new partnership with Arkwell Solutions, a data consulting firm that's helping us scale our infrastructure safely. But the moderator looked intrigued. Are you saying user data is being transferred to a third party? Chloe hesitated. Only metadata. Fully anonymized. Metadata based on proprietary behavior modeling? I called out from the audience. Heads turned. Cameras swiveled. Chloe's jaw clenched. We followed protocol. All transfers were approved through internal authorization. Not by me, I said, standing. And my access key was used without consent. The moderator looked between us like a child watching two parents argue during a school recital. Rick cleared his throat. Perhaps this isn't the... But then every screen behind the panel went dark. And a single message appeared. Project Remus. Alert protocol alpha triggered. Unauthorized data divergence detected. System freeze in progress. Gasps filled the auditorium. On every seat, smartphones buzzed with notifications. Foster Tech's emergency alert email, pinging stakeholders in real time. Chloe's face drained of color. What is this? Spencer whispered. She knew. I stepped forward.
Calm. Composed.
For the past 3 weeks, I've been monitoring unauthorized code injections into our core platform. These modifications redirected user data to Arkwell solutions, without board review, legal documentation, or founder approval. Chloe stood, fists clenched. You set this up. No, I said. You did. I just ensured there'd be an alarm when it happened. I turned to the moderator. And to your earlier question about transparency, this is what transparency looks like. Reporters were already tweeting. Phones were snapping photos. The stock ticker outside the venue froze as media picked up the alert. Dana appeared beside me, breathless, holding a printed report. The code audit's been validated. The Arkwell IPs match the metadata streams. We've got logs.
Dates.
Access fingerprints. Marcus stepped into the room from the side entrance. Injunction's been filed, he said. Effective immediately, Chloe Foster is suspended pending forensic audit. Spencer Clark is being subpoenaed for deposition. The room was a blur of whispers and shock. I turned to Chloe. This isn't about vengeance. It's about truth. And consequences. Her eyes were red. Lips parted in disbelief. You've destroyed everything.
No, I said.
You did. I just made sure everyone could see it. By the next morning, Foster Tech's name was on every major business headline. Whistleblower protocol implodes Foster Tech panel, CEO's authority under review. Founders' revenge or corporate integrity. Linda Foster exposes daughter in live panel shock. Foster Tech's Vision 2035 crashes into a wall of internal betrayal. I watched the media storm swirl from the 14th floor office of Marcus Cooper, my attorney, who is now fielding back-to-back calls from board members in various stages of panic. Rick just called, he said, hanging up. He's drafting a motion to suspend Chloe pending a full investigation. Angela's flipping, claiming she never saw the Arkwell transfer documentation. She probably didn't, I muttered. Chloe knows how to move behind shadows. Marcus raised an eyebrow. She learned from the best. I didn't smile. I moved in shadows to protect. She did it to extract.
He nodded.
Fair. Dana arrived 10 minutes later, looking exhausted but vindicated, a thumb drive in her hand. This is everything, she said. The code forks, the unauthorized keys, the IP matches to Arkwell's cluster, even the dummy shell company Chloe used to issue payment approvals through a compliance contractor. She dropped the drive into Marcus's palm like a final nail. She was running a full shadow pipeline, Dana added. She was waiting until after the Arkwell acquisition to go fully public. The contract was already drafted, dated for next quarter. Foster Tech would have handed off over 60% of its AI engine in the form of a strategic asset contribution. Without a board vote, I said, lips pressed thin. Dana nodded. And suddenly, the scale of it felt heavier than betrayal. It felt like planned erasure. The Chloe I had raised wasn't reckless. She was brilliant. But somewhere along the way, she'd decided the path forward required removing me entirely. And she'd almost done it. Later that day, emergency board meeting. The mood was electric with discomfort. The boardroom, normally home to polite ambiguity and strategic smiles, was now full of half-turned backs and silence that buzzed with tension. Rick cleared his throat, reading from a prepared statement. In light of the forensic evidence presented this morning and the unexpected disclosure at yesterday's event, the board is moving to formally suspend Chloe Foster from her role as CEO, effective immediately. Pending a full legal review, All access credentials will be revoked and oversight of technical operations will return to the founder chair. He looked up, eyes tired. Linda, the floor is yours. I didn't need notes. I never wanted this, I began. I didn't build Foster Tech to protect my own legacy. I built it because my daughter and I believed in something bigger than profits: data ethics, user dignity, and trust. What happened over the last year wasn't just a deviation from that mission, it was an attempted hijacking of it. Angela shifted uncomfortably. Rick looked down. One of the VCs on the line over Zoom rubbed his temples. I have no intention of returning as CEO, I continued. But I will not let this company become a cautionary tale about ambition untethered from accountability. I turned to Dana. I'd like to recommend Dana Griggs as interim CTO. She helped build this from day one. She knows the bones of it. Dana blinked, surprised. I'll serve as executive chair through the end of Q4, I said. My goals are simple: stabilize, audit, and restructure the internal checks that allowed this to happen. Rick nodded slowly. The board accepts your proposal. And just like that, I had the controls again. Not to wield power. God knows I didn't want another sleepless year on the front line, but to protect what we'd built. And to protect the people still worth fighting for. 2 days later, Spencer's confession. Marcus and I met Spencer in a quiet backroom at a private law office. He looked worse than before. Hollow eyes. Sleepless. She's not talking to me, he said, voice hoarse. Her lawyer's telling her to go silent. She's blaming me. Says I lured her into this deal to benefit Arkwell. Did you? Marcus asked. Spencer shook his head.
No.
I warned her. I told her the optics were bad. But she said it was time to start monetizing what you can't patent: vision. Those were her words. He slid a small white envelope across the table. This is every conversation I saved. Emails, texts, even one audio recording from a call with Arkwell's acquisition team. Why are you giving this to us? I asked. Because I want out, he said. Out of Arkwell. Out of the public crosshairs. I'm not innocent, but I never tried to steal Foster Tech. Marcus opened the envelope and skimmed through a few pages. His eyes widened. This proves intent. And misrepresentation. If we file this publicly, she's facing not just removal but potential SEC investigation. Spencer looked down. Do what you have to do. He stood, then hesitated. I loved her, you know. Or thought I did. But something changed in her once the investors started whispering about market cap. She stopped looking at me as a partner and started seeing me as an exit strategy. He left without another word. That evening, an unexpected visit. The knock came at 9:14 p.m. When I opened the door, Chloe stood on the porch, coat unzipped, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her makeup was smeared, as if she'd either been crying or didn't care anymore. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. We sat in silence for several minutes, the fire crackling low between us. I thought I was protecting our vision, she said finally. I thought Arkwell was the future, bigger, scalable, something we could license globally. You were protecting your vision, I said gently. Not ours. And not the one our users trusted. She exhaled, eyes glassy. I didn't mean to erase you. I couldn't see you as part of what came next. That hurt more than anything. But I am, I said. Even now. Especially now. She nodded slowly. They're preparing to press charges, aren't they? There's enough to start an investigation, I replied. But what happens next depends on what you do next. Chloe stood and looked around the room, her eyes landing on a photo of us at our first product launch, arms raised in victory, cheeks smudged with celebratory frosting. I don't think I know how to come back from this, she whispered. I stood too. You don't come back from it. You go forward. And you decide who you're going to be next. 3 days after Chloe's unannounced visit, I sat in the conference room at Marcus's law office, surrounded by an eerie quietness that felt more funereal than victorious. The evidence Spencer had surrendered, emails, call logs, even the invoice trail from Arkwell, had been handed to our internal legal team and was now sitting in front of a special committee. The committee would decide whether to refer Chloe's actions to the SEC for formal investigation. My own name, once celebrated in those marble corridors, now elicited nervous stares, admiration laced with apprehension. Some saw me as a savior. Others feared I had opened a Pandora's box that would devour the company from the inside out. Dana entered the room carrying 2 manila folders, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. "One for you," she said, handing me the thinner folder. "The others for the committee." I opened mine. It contained a signed confession from Chloe. Short, typed, almost clinical. I authorized the integration of foster tech behavioral modules into Arkwell solutions without board review or full founder consent. I acted without malicious intent, but recognized that my actions violated internal policy and fiduciary expectations. Chloe Foster. There were no apologies, no elaborations, just a quiet admission of guilt. "She gave this willingly?" I asked. Dana nodded. She didn't even flinch. I studied the signature at the bottom.
Clean. Composed.
Like everything Chloe had ever done. But I saw something else in it, too: resignation. "She's not fighting it." Dana hesitated. "She's not fighting you. That's different." 2 hours later, Foster Tech's Emergency Ethics Committee. A circle of 12 board-appointed individuals sat around the conference table like jurors. They'd all read the report. They'd all seen the logs. They had the confession. Angela Mystery sat at the far end, looking 10 years older than the last time I saw her. Rick avoided my eyes entirely. Marcus stood to speak. "We're not here to litigate intent. We're here to address accountability. Miss Foster's actions, unauthorized use of admin keys, clandestine IP mirroring, concealed transfer of proprietary assets, constitute violations that merit serious disciplinary action, including criminal referral if the board sees fit." I could feel the tension shift toward me. They were waiting. I was, after all, the one with the founder's authority. I could recommend her formal expulsion. I could press for prosecution. Instead, I stood with the confession in hand. "I built this company with my daughter in a garage that smelled like burnt coffee and bad solder," I began. "We built it because we believed technology could empower without exploiting. We believed in human-first code, transparent systems, compassionate algorithms." I held up the document. Somewhere along the way, Chloe forgot that. Maybe because I wasn't strong enough to remind her. Maybe because we live in a world that rewards disruption more than decency. I paused. The room was silent. She broke my trust. She betrayed this company. She betrayed herself. Another pause. But if this company still stands for anything, it should stand for learning, for evolution, for repair. Chloe has resigned from her CEO position. She has forfeited her founder's equity, and she has agreed to a permanent non-voting advisory role, should the board choose to allow it. I recommend we accept her resignation and decline to pursue criminal charges. Eyes flicked across the room. Whispers began. Dana stared at me in shock. "Linda," Marcus said softly, "are you sure?" I nodded. "This isn't forgiveness. It's recognition. What she built with me still matters. And if we turn every mistake into a crucifixion, we stop being better than the systems we claim to disrupt." That night, back at the brownstone, Chloe met me on the front steps, coat wrapped tightly, hair unwashed. She looked like a version of herself I hadn't seen in years, raw, stripped down. "You didn't press charges." "No," I said. "I wouldn't have blamed you if you had." "I know." We sat on the steps in silence, wrapped in the October chill. "I'm going away for a while," she said at last. "Costa Rica. Digital detox. Real therapy. Maybe a little hard labor at one of those nonprofit farms where you pick fruit and remind yourself the world doesn't revolve around IPOs." I smiled despite myself. She turned to me, serious now. "You could have destroyed me." I looked up at the dark sky. "I could have. But then I'd be no better than the board members who tried to strip my legacy without asking what I wanted." Sometimes, power is knowing you could, but choosing not to. A beat passed. "Do you hate me?" she asked, small and unsure. I looked at her. My daughter. The girl who once stayed up all night debugging a login screen with me over gummy worms and whiteboard sketches. "No," I said. "But I don't trust you yet." She nodded. "Fair." As she stood to leave, I handed her a flash drive. "What's this?" "The original algorithm," I said. "From before the VC money. From before Spencer. The one we wrote together." Her eyes filled. "You still had it?" "I always did." She left in silence, fingers clenched around the drive like a lifeline. The first Monday after Chloe's departure, Foster Tech's headquarters felt quieter. Not in an empty way, but in a steadier, almost reverent tone. The chaos had subsided. For the first time in over a year, the energy in the building wasn't reactive, it was intentional. I stood in the atrium that morning, watching employees come in. People smiled differently now. Nods of acknowledgement lingered a second longer. It was subtle, but unmistakable. I'd spent the weekend reviewing everything Chloe left behind: internal notes, dev proposals, even scribbled UI concepts on tablet screenshots. As angry as I had been, I couldn't ignore the truth. Buried under the ambition and manipulation had still been brilliance. She was trying to build something bold. She'd just stopped looking over her shoulder long enough to remember who she was building it for. 10 a.m., Executive Suite. Dana stood across from me in my old office, now hers. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, holding a steaming mug of chai. "You're more than ready," I said. "You've been building this company piece by piece since we could barely afford whiteboards." She looked around, as if expecting someone to step in and tell her it was all a mistake. "I keep thinking someone's going to come down that hall and say, 'Sorry, there's a mix-up. You're not supposed to be here.'" I smiled. "That's how you know it's real." We sat together reviewing the roadmap she'd prepared: a new ethical review board, a simplified permissions architecture, open source components for transparency. "You know," she said, "we could finally move forward with Project Willow." I blinked. "You still remember Willow?" She nodded. "The AI mentoring module we started building for underfunded schools. Chloe shelved it because it wasn't profitable." She said it didn't scale, I recalled. Dana smiled. "It scales emotionally. Let's do it." That afternoon, cafe in Back Bay. Thomas met me at our favorite corner cafe, his camera bag slung across his shoulder. "Still getting used to seeing you on the news," he teased, setting down his cappuccino. "You've become something of a cult hero among startup founders. The grandmother who fought back." I'd settle for the woman who wasn't erased. He laughed. "That, too." We talked for an hour, about Chloe, about the company, about how the damage wasn't just legal but emotional. Then I pulled an envelope from my bag. "This is for you," I said. He opened it slowly. Inside, a deed for a 1,200 square foot creative studio space in South Boston. A letter of investment for his photography collective. A simple note: "Use it to tell the stories that matter." His hands trembled. "Grandma."
You saw me, Thomas.
When everyone else was too busy planning my exit, you paused. You noticed. You helped me fight. You reminded me who I was. He swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll build something beautiful." "I already started," he whispered. He opened his phone and showed me a photo from the day of the media panel. It wasn't of Chloe, or the panic, or even me. It was of a woman in the front row, middle-aged, unknown, sitting up straighter as the truth was revealed. Eyes wet, face stunned. "Who is she?" I asked. "I don't know," Thomas said. "But I think she saw something in that moment. Something about standing up when you've been quietly pushed aside." She started crying. And I thought, this is the real legacy. Not the code. Not the IPO. The permission to stand again. 1 week later, Foster Tech Town Hall. We held our first full company town hall since the shakeup. There was no champagne, no string quartet, just folding chairs and a whiteboard. Dana took the stage with a notepad. No teleprompter. "Transparency isn't a slide," she began. "It's a conversation. And this is ours." Over the next hour, we answered every question from interns, engineers, admin staff, even a few contractors on Zoom. When it came time for me to speak, I didn't stand behind the podium. I walked into the middle of the crowd. This company, I said, isn't just about AI. It's about human intelligence, emotional intelligence, the kind that notices when someone gets left out of a meeting, or spoken over, or rebranded into silence. I looked around. Those days are over. Applause. Not the kind that erupts out of obligation, but the kind that swells like a wave you didn't see coming. When I stepped off the floor, I knew my work here was almost done. That evening, my Cambridge apartment. I sat on the balcony, sipping tea, watching the Charles River reflect the city lights. A package had arrived earlier that day. No return address. Inside, a single photo. It was of Chloe and me, years ago, working at the old dining room table surrounded by cables and paper sketches. I was pointing at a monitor. She was laughing. On the back, in her handwriting. For what it's worth, I see you now. Tears welled up. Not just because of what we'd lost, but because maybe, just maybe, something different could still be rebuilt. The first public image of Chloe in weeks surfaced on a Sunday. It wasn't a press conference. Not a statement or rebuttal or PR-curated apology. It was a blurry phone photo, posted by a local wellness center in Santa Teresa, Costa Rica. Chloe was in hiking boots, her ponytail messy, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She looked tired, but finally real. The caption simply read, "One of our volunteers sharing her journey during a reflection circle this morning. Proof that growth begins with honesty." No hashtags, no tags, no spin, just her. That Monday, Marcus's office. Marcus placed the article from TechWorld in front of me. From chaos to clarity, how Foster Tech rebuilt trust in the wake of internal crisis. The subtitle made me smile. Founder Linda Foster steps down with her legacy intact and a new chapter ahead. "I assume you've seen this?" he asked. "I helped fact-check it," I said, sipping coffee. "It's not often you get to edit your own obituary." He raised a brow. Stepping down was a bold move. "It was the only move," I replied. "My staying would have kept us in the shadow of the scandal. It needed to become Dana's company. Not mine. Not Chloe's. Hers." "And what about the advisory board offer?" I accepted. 1 meeting per quarter. No voting power. Just a seat in the room to listen and, if asked, to guide. Marcus nodded approvingly. A graceful exit. Very unlike our industry. I smiled. That's what made it necessary. He tapped his pen. "And Chloe? She's quiet. Still in Costa Rica. Still processing." "She's lucky you showed her mercy." "No," I said softly. "I'm lucky that I didn't let my pain become my blueprint. That I stopped the cycle before it passed to another generation." That evening, phone call from Chloe. It came just before dusk. Her voice was cautious but clear. "Hi, Mom." I stepped out onto my balcony. "Hi, sweetheart. I heard you step down." "I did." Silence. "Why?" she finally asked. "Because staying would have been about me. And I finally realized legacy isn't about being in control. It's about what remains when you let go." Chloe inhaled. "You were right, you know. About everything.
About what I became.
About what I let go of." "No," I said. "You weren't wrong. You were hurting. And the world rewards that kind of pain when it turns into power. It just rarely asks if the cost is worth it." She choked out a breath. "Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" "I don't know. But I think you've started forgiving yourself. And that's the only thing that can actually start the work." Another pause. "I've been journaling," she said. "For the first time in years." I smiled. "That's a good place to start." Then she added, quietly, "When I come home, can we have tea? Just tea. No legacy talk. No strategy. Just you and me?" "Of course," I whispered. "That's all I've ever wanted." 1 week later, Foster Tech's Community Day. Dana and I stood together at the edge of a packed auditorium, watching as Thomas took the stage with a slideshow behind him. His new project, Faces of Integrity, featured portraits of technologists who'd blown the whistle, changed policy, or rebuilt systems from within. The last slide showed two faces. One was Chloe, smiling, tear-streaked, holding a shovel in the Costa Rican dirt. The other was me, caught mid-laugh during a user Q&A 2 years ago, sleeves rolled up, whiteboard behind me. The caption read, "We don't always inherit our legacy. Sometimes we have to fight for it, and sometimes we have to let it go to save it." Dana turned to me. "He's good. Really good."
He's right, I said.
That night, my apartment. I lit a candle and opened a small velvet box. Inside was the pendant Chloe had returned to me, the diamond I once hid in a doll. I'd had it reset, this time, in a shared design. 2 interlocking circles. I placed it beside a letter I was drafting. A letter I'd leave for her when she returned. "Dearest Chloe, this isn't a reward. This isn't forgiveness wrapped in gold. This is a reminder that what is precious can be broken, buried, even forgotten, and still come back shining when we finally learn how to hold it. You were always more than your worst decision, and I was always more than my role as your co-founder. We are mother and daughter first. Let's start there. Love."
Mom.
I signed it. Then I stepped out onto the balcony and watched the lights flicker across the Charles River. The story wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, it finally felt honest. It was a Sunday afternoon in late November when Chloe returned. No press. No entourage. No statements. Just a quiet knock at my apartment door. I opened it to find her standing there in a gray wool coat, too light for the Boston chill. Her hair was damp from the mist outside, her hands tucked into her sleeves like she wasn't sure if she was welcome to come in or just drop something off and vanish again. "You came," I said. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. That legacy is what remains when we let go." I stepped aside and motioned to the kettle already whistling on the stove. "Tea's ready." We sat at my small kitchen table, the same one where she once soldered her first circuit board beside me at age 11. Her fingers had trembled back then, nervous but bold. The same fingers now wrapped around a ceramic mug. "I kept thinking the world was waiting for me to prove something," she said softly. "And I guess I thought pushing you out would be my proof. That I was strong enough. Visionary enough." "You were strong," I replied. "You still are. But strength without reflection? It turns into something dangerous." Chloe nodded. "I know that now." We sipped in silence for a while. Not the awkward silence of people dodging words, but the kind that only exists between two people who've come through a fire and realize they're both still alive. "I saw the article Thomas wrote," she said eventually. "And the photos. The one of that woman in the audience, that moment, it stayed with me." "It stayed with a lot of people," I said. "He's got your fire, you know." Chloe smiled. "He's got your ethics." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. She set it on the table between us and slid it toward me. "What's this?" I asked. "My shares," she said. "What's left of them, anyway. Technically, I still own 3%. The board offered to buy me out, but I told them no. I wanted to give them to you directly." "I don't want your shares," I said. "I know. But I want you to decide where they go. You earned that. And I need to learn how to part with things I once used to define myself." I opened the box. A single silver key sat inside, attached to a card. The card read, "For Project Willow. For something that matters." "You remembered," I whispered. "I never forgot," she said. "I just buried it under noise." I closed the box and set it aside, carefully. "You could come back, you know. Not to the board. Not as an executive. But as a contributor. A mentor. Willow needs voices that know what it means to fall and stand back up." She blinked, stunned. "You'd let me do that?" "I won't let you do anything," I said gently. "I'll invite you. If you're ready." Chloe looked around my apartment, so much simpler than the brownstone, yet full of light, intention, peace. "I'm not ready today," she admitted. but maybe soon. That's enough, I said. She reached into her coat once more, and this time pulled out a tiny knitted object. It took me a moment to realize what I was looking at. It was the female doll. The one I had made. The one she'd thrown away. I found it in my luggage, she said, her voice catching. I have no idea how it got there. I must have scooped it up by accident the night I packed my things for Costa Rica. It's worn now, but it's still here. I took it in my hands. The yarn had softened with time and travel. It smelled faintly of rosemary and dust. I opened the seam, she added. I know the diamond's gone. I'm not asking for it back. I thought maybe I could fix it. Not the doll. Us. I stared at her. My daughter. My co-founder. My greatest joy, and at times, my deepest sorrow.
You already have, I said.
We both have. 1 month later, Foster Tech headquarters. Dana's voice rang clearly through the open concept space. Welcome to the first internal town hall for Project Willow, she said. Our mission: to restore education equity with AI designed not to replace teachers, but to amplify their reach. Applause thundered. And there, in the back of the room, Chloe stood beside me. Not at the front, not on a pedestal, but beside me. She wasn't the star of this show. She was the soil. Finally, a contributor. After the session ended, Thomas found me on the terrace. She really came through, he said. We all did, I replied. Eventually. Will you ever go back to the company full-time? He asked. I shook my head. I've told my story. Now it's time for others to tell theirs. He smiled, then reached into his bag and handed me a framed photo. It was a photo he'd taken the morning after the tea. Me and Chloe, side by side at the kitchen table, mugs in hand, laughter midair. Truth has a texture, he said. And that moment, that was truth. I hung the photo in my study, right above the desk where everything once began. Not because it was the start of a new empire, but because it was the moment we both finally saw each other.
Clearly.
Honestly.
Completely.